Hey guys, how's it going? Dudey here. I am back with another video. Today we are going to look into one of the most deplorable killing sprees I think this country has ever seen. We're going to look into the Moors murders. The Moors murders were committed by Ian Brady and Myra Hindley between July of 1963 and October of 1965. It's safe to say the crimes committed by those two in the 60s have shook the British people and the world to its core. Ian and Myra were sadomasochistic killers. They would stalk their victims, trick them into coming along with them, often to the moors, where they would be sexually assaulted, tortured and killed before being buried in shallow graves. One of the key factors that really disgusts people is that the victims of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley were between the ages of 10 and 17. 4 of the 5 victims were definitely sexually assaulted, quite possibly after the murder took place. What would drive people to commit such heinous crimes? Well, the school friends of Myra Hindley never saw it coming. As a child growing up, and even into her young teenage years, she was seen as innocent, vulnerable, just in need of extra TLC. Often seen as the belle of the ball and the life of the party. She loved disco, pubs, clubs. She was very much a social person in her younger years. None of her school friends would ever think that Myra Hindley would become the woman deemed the most evil woman in Britain. The first woman to be actively known to be involved in the serial killing and rape of children, and eventually sentenced to life imprisonment. It's actually hypothesized by psychologists that Myra probably would have never ended up this way had she not come across Ian Brady. Which of course begs the question between nature and nurture. Are you born evil, or is the environment in which you reside a key factor into what path you take? And clearly Myra Hindley, whether she was born this way or whether the environment turned her this way, ended up on one of the most evil paths imaginable. So like I say, prior to coming into contact with Ian Brady, Myra Hindley really didn't show the stereotypical signs of being a killer. There was no harming of animals, you know, there was no harming of people or anything like that. But that's not to say there wasn't trauma in her early life, which some people that were around her think might have been the initial nudge down the path of evil for Myra Hindley. At a young age, Myra had a friend called Michael Higgins, and they used to hang out all the time together. It really was a best friend for Myra. Apparently she really liked the fact that his initials was MH like hers, and they were basically inseparable, apart from one day where she didn't come out to play and Michael went down to the local reservoir to muck about with a few friends, and unfortunately, tragically, Michael ended up drowning in the reservoir. And it is thought that this might have been the catalyst for big change in Myra's life. After Michael's death, Myra spent a lot of time with Michael's parents, and in fact because of this converted to Catholicism because Michael was a Catholic. So Myra found God, and she really buried herself in the religion, and by doing this she started to segregate herself from others and just hide within the Bible and the religion itself. But also she started to kind of resent everyone else and felt that they were to blame somehow for Michael Higgins passing. People close to Myra at the time say she was never the same after this. Myra did find love at the age of 17. In the 60s, a lot of women's ambition was to have the housewife lifestyle, the 2 kids, the marriage, the house, the stay-at-home wife. But Myra Hindley did not want that. She wanted so much more for herself in a sexual way as well. She felt like something was missing, and many hypothesized this was the element of violence and sadomasochism. She wanted more excitement in her life. Shortly after this, she got a job as a receptionist, and this is where hers and Ian Brady's paths would finally cross. However, initially Ian Brady never so much as spoke to her for months, but he already had the heart of Myra Hindley, who was beginning to become obsessed with him. She even had a diary where she would keep record of the days that he looked at her or didn't look at her. Eventually, at the Christmas party, they became officially an item, and it didn't take long at all for Ian Brady to introduce her to his ways of life. He began to indoctrinate her into the ways of Adolf Hitler. He got her to read Mein Kampf. Ian introduced Myra to very raunchy sadomasochistic sex. He also convinced her God does not exist, so she gave up Catholicism. He showed her a lot of tapes and recordings and music of Nazi propaganda and really started to warp her mind into the perfect accomplice for this dream he had of murdering, raping and torturing children. Ian Brady himself had a very troubled upbringing. He was born in Glasgow as a result of an affair, was fostered at just the age of 2, and by the time he became a teenager was so troubled he turned to crime, and what the court system decided was to ship him off to his birth mother, who happened to be in Manchester, which is why he was in Manchester, to get the job where Myra was a secretary for their paths to cross. Now, as I said, he had this dream of raping, torturing and killing children, which he shared very early on with Myra. Now, you would imagine this would disgust Myra and scare her away or get her to tell the police what is going on with Ian Brady. No, this was the excitement that she felt that she had been missing her whole life. This is exactly what she wanted, and so she became the perfect accomplice for Ian because he wanted to lure children, and obviously being an imposing, intimidating man was quite difficult. But if you have a local well-known woman who would happily lure children into her car, you have the perfect recipe for this heinous crime. The total known victims of Ian and Myra were 5 children between the ages of 10 and 17. You have Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Leslie Ann Downey and Edward Evans. At least 4 of them were known to be sexually assaulted, either prior to or after death. It is believed that Brady's method for selecting the victims were to follow Myra in her car on his motorbike, and he would flash the headlamp if a child was to walk past, and that would signal to Myra that he wants her to pick this child up and drive over to the moors. The first victim was Pauline Reed, dressed in a pretty pink dress going to a dance. Myra pulled up next to Pauline, who she knew quite well, so Pauline wasn't startled or intimidated or scared or even questioned what Myra was to ask of Pauline next. Myra asked if she would accompany her to the moors to find a lost glove. So, wanting to help this familiar person, Pauline jumped in the car and drove over to the moors, closely followed by Ian Brady. As Pauline exited the car to go onto the moors to look for the glove, Ian came up close behind her, hit her over the head with a shovel. He then proceeded to sexually assault her and then bury her shallow in the moors, as Myra looked on. John Kilbride was the next victim. He would often be down the markets at the weekends helping the market stall owners pack away their things, and would be home at 6:30 sharp for dinner. However, one evening he failed to return, and his friends and family knew instantly that something wasn't right. Posters were put up all over the town, and there was even a local pub that would often have pictures of missing people in just above the bar, just to see if it could spark any memory of the missing person in its patrons. The haunting thing is, Myra Hindley would often drink at this pub and sometimes sit underneath the missing poster of John Kilbride, knowing full well where the boy's body was and what happened to him. It was in fact Myra who picked up John from the market that day and took him to the moors, where Brady brutally sexually assaulted him, tried to slit the boy's throat, and then, due to failure, decided to choke him to death with a shoelace before burying him on the moors. When John was found, his underpants and trousers were around his ankles. Again, signs of sexual assault. One of the key pieces of evidence into the depravity of Myra Hindley's mind was that shortly after the burial of John Kilbride, Myra Hindley posed for a photo over the boy's body. It served as some kind of sick trophy. The third victim was Keith, who was arguably the most tragic of the 5 victims because his body still to this day, over 5 decades later, has never been found. Even as Ian Brady lay dying on his deathbed, he failed to tell anyone the whereabouts of Keith's body. Keith was lured into the car by Myra by asking him to pack up some boxes in the car and then unload them at the destination. Keith was believed to be walked into the moors about 3/4 of a mile, where he was hit over the head with a shovel, choked to death with a metal cord, and then sexually assaulted and buried. The 4th victim was Leslie Ann Dudey. This one was different. She was picked up from a fun fair on Boxing Day, but rather than being taken to the moors, she was driven back to Ian and Myra's house. This was done so that Leslie could be tortured to a higher degree, but also this was done so that the torture and murder could be documented. And there are even tape recordings, which obviously I will not be showing in this video today, but I've read the transcripts. They are nothing short of horrific. Leslie can be heard pleading for her mother. It's thought to be an attempt to appeal to Myra's maternal instincts. However, obviously this fell on deaf ears when you realise what a monster Myra Hindley really is. The girl could be heard pleading for her life whilst being told to shut up by Myra Hindley and Ian Brady. The most concern Myra shows in the entire tapes is when she is worried that the neighbours might hear the little girl being tortured and murdered, so they might get caught. Not at all concerned for the well-being of Leslie. After this, Leslie's body was taken to the moors and buried. Edward Evans was the final victim. This one's 17. It is believed he was lured to the house to have sex with Ian Brady. Once they brought him back to the house, strangely, Ian asked Myra to go and fetch David Smith, who was Myra's brother-in-law. Ian believed David would be up for getting in on the crimes that Ian and Myra had been committing, as David was a bit of a white supremacist and known in the area for being a bit of a hard man. However, this would prove to be the undoing of the Moors murders, because although David allegedly assisted in the murder of Edward Evans because he was a 17-year-old strong lad who fought for his life, what David saw that day truly shook him to his core and resulted in him calling the police via a local phone box and revealing everything that he knew about Ian and Myra. David protests his innocence, saying yes, he did participate and help in the disposal of the body, but he only did that to preserve his own life. The police investigation that came from David's phone call led to the house being investigated and searched. The body of Edward Evans was found in the bedroom, and they found plans for a bank robbery. The investigation was so thorough that they found in the spine of a book a ticket for some luggage. They went and claimed the luggage, and in there they found the tapes and recordings and photographs of Leslie Ann Dudey's final moments, her torture and her murder, which took place 6 months prior to the luggage being attained. David Smith told the police that Ian had joked about burying children on the moors, which of course led the police to the moors, and the digging and searching began, with police believing it to be the resting place of 4 missing children. On the 10th of October 1965, the body of Leslie Ann Dudey was found, and just 11 days later, the body of 12-year-old John Kilbride was found. He'd been missing now for 2 years. Pauline Reed was found after a 100-day search in 1987. This came about because Myra Hindley was seeking parole in the 80s and so thought she'd help, so she gave a rough whereabouts of one of the bodies 2 decades after the murder. Brady was sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences, and Hindley was given 2, plus a concurrent 7-year sentence for harbouring Brady in the knowledge that he had murdered Kilbride. Brady was taken to Durham prison, and Hindley was sent to Holloway prison. And Brady settled into prison life very quickly, accepted his fate, but Myra didn't. She fought it tooth and nail till the very end. She sought parole whenever it was available to her, but was never granted it. Myra Hindley died at the age of 60 in 2002. Ian Brady passed away in 2017. Brady had the chance to finally do the right thing and reveal where Keith was buried nearly 50 years after his murder. But he chose not to do that. He took the location of Keith's body to the grave. Keith's mother died in 2012, never knowing the whereabouts of where her son was buried. And Brady's decision not to tell the family in 2017 where the body was buried means that they will never have peace of mind and be able to lay their family member to rest. In one final sick twist, Brady's dying wish was to be cremated and scattered on the moors, but a judge soon put a stop to this and banned Brady's ashes from being scattered there. In my opinion, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley are the personification of evil. What they did to those children is truly the worst thing that a human being can commit. What do you guys think? What do you think about the Moors murders? What do you think about Ian Brady? What do you think about Myra Hindley? Please do let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. If you want to support me as a creator, you can go to Patreon. That's an amazing way to support creators. I also stream on twitch.tv/Dudey. It's a great place to catch me. I stream most days, guys. Thank you so much. Continue to support the content by liking, sharing, and subscribing. I will see you very soon, guys. Sweet one, geese.